1 o'clock right here.
How many, please?
I need 3 tickets, please.
Hi, everybody, and welcome aboard the Circle Line. I'm John Curran, and I'll be your guide as we sail completely around the island of Manhattan. As we pull out into the Hudson, the big ship to our left is the aircraft carrier Intrepid. We'll see more of her as we return to the pier at the end of our trip. We're now ready to sail, and Captain Tom Curry will blow our whistle to alert ships behind us of our approach. So take a seat, sit back, and enjoy America's favorite boat ride. New York City, dubbed the Big Apple by jazz musicians in the 1920s, is indeed the cultural and financial capital of the United States. It is not, by the way, the capital of New York State. The city of Albany holds that honor. Modern-day New York City was incorporated on January 1st, 1898, and includes 5 boroughs: Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, the Bronx, and Manhattan, and has a population of over 8 million people. Manhattan is 13 miles long, 2 miles at its widest, and has a population of 1 million people, which swells to 2 million during the business day. That's Midtown Manhattan on our left, and that long, low, sleek building is the new Jacob K. Javits Convention Center at 34th Street. The 1.8 million square foot convention center was designed by I.M. Pei and contains the largest single exhibition hall in the Western Hemisphere. It's big enough to play 15 regulation football games simultaneously. 34th, the Miracle Street, is one of New York's major crosstown thoroughfares. Rising high above it at Fifth Avenue stands the Empire State Building. For over 40 years, it was the tallest building in the world. Built in 1931 at a cost of $41 million, it is 102 stories high with a 160-foot antenna on top. It has 73 elevators and 5,000 windows, which are washed twice a month. If you look at it tonight, you'll see the top 30 floors illuminated. Quite a sight. One of New York's main shopping areas and the home of Macy's is Herald Square at 34th and 6th Avenue. Further west on 34th Street is the heart of New York's Garment District, which stretches along 7th Avenue to 40th Street. The manufacture of ready-to-wear clothing is New York's biggest industry, employing over 300,000 people. At 8th Avenue is Madison Square Garden, home of the New York Knicks and Rangers. In addition, it hosts other attractions such as the circus and rodeo. This is the 4th site for the garden. Even so, it retains the name of the first garden, which was actually located at Madison Square. As we go further down the Hudson on this wonderful day, you will notice a beige building. That's the old Bell Telephone Laboratory, where direct dialing was invented. Bell Tel has since moved, and the building has been converted to a center which provides low-income housing and workspace for artists and their families. It's called Westbeth. Directly inland from here is a section of New York that has long been known as a haven for artists, Greenwich Village. Initially attracted by the low rents and charm of this area, a feeling of neighborliness and friendliness has grown here with its galleries, shops, and outdoor cafes. Ironically, many picturesque tree-lined streets of the village have become extremely desirable and therefore expensive, forcing many artists to move to other areas of the city. And where might that be? Well, just a little further south is an area called Soho. New York artists seem to have found the ultimate in the large industrial loft buildings of this quarter of New York. Many galleries have established branches here, making Soho a must place to visit for people in the arts. The first tall building you see in the financial district is the Woolworth Building. It's a fine example of handstone carving. In fact, it was called the Cathedral of Commerce when it first opened in 1913. For 18 years, it was the tallest building in the world at 60 stories high. It was built for Frank Woolworth of the Five and Dime chain. South of the Woolworth Building are the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, 110 stories tall, about 1/4 mile high. You can take a 58-second elevator ride to the observation deck in the clouds, and on a clear day, you can even see Philadelphia. You might remember the human fly, George Willig. Well, he left his autograph. The two buildings rise above a 5-acre plaza where 50,000 people work here every business day. And those are TV and radio antennas on top of the North Tower, placed here after they were removed from the shorter Empire State Building. In front of the Twin Towers is the $3 billion office and residential development called Battery Park City, now under construction. Dow Jones, Merrill Lynch, and American Express are building their corporate headquarters here. When completed, Battery Park City will have a residential population of 30,000 and a workday population of another 30,000. There's a nice picture coming up, so keep your eye out as we pass the World Trade Center. Further south, all the way to the tip of Manhattan Island, is the rest of the financial district. But let us now turn our attention to the other side of the boat. Off to our right is Ellis Island, our country's main immigration depot. From 1892 to 1954, some 16 million future Americans were processed here. 1 out of every 3 Americans can trace their roots to Ellis Island. Ellis Island was closed in 1954 and fell into disrepair. As you can see by all the scaffolding, the island is being restored. Ellis Island is closed to the public during this renovation, but plans to open soon for tourists, with an elaborate museum recreating the immigrants' experience. With Manhattan in the background, now's a perfect time to take pictures. And of course, just next to Ellis Island is the Statue of Liberty. Unveiled on October 28, 1886, designed by Frederick August Bartholdi. Its interior was designed by Gustave Eiffel, who built the Eiffel Tower. The statue was a centennial birthday gift from the people of France, not the government, to the people of the United States to commemorate the alliance between the two countries during the American and French revolutions. The statue is 151 feet tall, making it the tallest sculpture in the world. Together with its base, it stands 300 feet above the water. The outside skin is made of copper. After years of exposure to the elements, it has formed a green protective coating, or patina. The book she holds in her left hand represents the American Declaration of Independence. The original torch of freedom, which was illuminated from within, was removed July 4, 1984, and replaced by the current torch, this one covered by gold leaf. Now you can climb right up to the top of the statue, or take an elevator to the top of the pedestal and walk the rest of the way up. It's a long, winding staircase, and when you reach the top, you can look out of the windows in her crown and get a good view of New York Harbor. Inscribed at the base is the poem written in 1883 by Emma Lazarus, the most famous part of which reads, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." Giovanni da Verrazzano in 1524 was the first European to arrive in New York. He was followed almost 100 years later by Henry Hudson, who ventured up the river that now bears his name. And with Peter Stuyvesant's surrender of Fort Amsterdam in 1664, New York City began to flourish. The Verrazzano Narrows Bridge, built in 1964, is the longest suspension bridge in the United States. It connects the boroughs of Brooklyn and Staten Island. Staten Island is primarily a residential area because until the bridge was built, the only way to get to it from the rest of the city was by ferry. The Staten Island Ferry, famous in these parts as probably the best buy around. For 25 cents, you can travel round trip, Manhattan to Staten Island. We're in Upper New York Harbor, an excellent deep water port. The Port District is roughly defined as a circle radiating 25 miles in all directions with the Statue of Liberty at its center. Heading back around, we now see the southernmost tip of Manhattan. It is here in 1683 that British colonists, fearing an attack from the French, built a platform for a battery of guns, hence the name, the Battery. The Bronx is up and the Battery's down. Before we reach Manhattan, to our right we can see Governor's Island, originally settled by Europeans before Manhattan. At the start of the 1800s, a circular fort, Castle William, was built, and the island remains a military installation today. As Captain Curry pilots us past the east side of Manhattan, we'll be traveling up what we New Yorkers call the East River. Only it's not a river in the true sense. It's an estuary or tidal strait, a body of water that connects two larger bodies of water. In this case, it connects Upper New York Bay with Long Island Sound to the north. To our right is the Heights area of Brooklyn, a fashionable residential section. If Brooklyn were a city on its own, it would be the fourth largest city in the nation, with a population of over 2.5 million people. Back on our left, we are still passing the financial district. You see the green and white piers that look like balloons? They are air domes containing year-round tennis courts. Now, directly above the small dome, you will catch a glimpse of Trinity Episcopal Church, which was founded in 1697 and sits at the end of Wall Street. It's coming up. Be careful. There it is. The present structure is the third church on this site and was built in 1846. The Dutch built a wooden wall here for protection. The stockade was removed, but the name stuck. In 1792, 24 traders met daily to discuss and transact business near a sycamore tree here. They formed an association of rules and conduct that became the New York Stock Exchange. Diagonally across Wall Street from the New York Stock Exchange sits Federal Hall. Built on the site of the first City Hall in 1699, it became our nation's first capital. In 1788, George Washington was sworn in as our country's first president. On April 30th, 1789, the federal government was then transferred to Philadelphia. Continuing up the East River past the final edges of the financial district, we can see on our left a large red pier. That's part of the South Street Seaport Restoration. It's an area full of shops and cafes, museums, restaurants, and even has some restored sailing vessels. It's a great place to visit. It has been said that the two finest examples of architecture in New York City are not buildings. One is Central Park. The other is the Brooklyn Bridge. Now a National Historic Landmark, construction began in 1870. At the time of its completion in 1883, the Brooklyn Bridge and Trinity Church were the two tallest structures in Manhattan. The woven steel cable suspension type bridge was conceived by a German-born engineer, John A. Roebling. When this bridge was finished, automobiles still hadn't been invented. It was built for pedestrian, streetcar, and horse and buggy traffic. There is still a wide pedestrian walk across the center of the bridge. On July 23, 1886, Steve Brody made his famous jump from this bridge to win a $200 bet. Behind the Brooklyn Bridge sits City Hall. A wonderful mixture of French Renaissance and Georgian architecture, City Hall was opened in 1811 and serves as the official business address of the mayor. We'll see his official residence later in the trip. It also houses the City Council and is probably best known as the finishing point of New York's famous ticker tape parades. Right next door to City Hall are some good examples of an aspect that makes New York unique: its ethnic diversity. Crowded into fewer than 20 square blocks, Chinatown is the cultural and spiritual center for New Yorkers of Chinese descent. And only in New York could you go 2 blocks from Chinatown and be in Little Italy. Like Chinatown, it is known for festivals and fine restaurants, especially coffee houses for espresso and dessert lovers. Just a little further north is another legendary ethnic part of the city, the Lower East Side. Bargain hunting is a favorite pastime here, since many shopkeepers use the sidewalks as extensions of their own stores, which, by the way, are closed on Saturdays, the Jewish Sabbath, and open on Sundays. Back to our right is the site of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. It was called the Can-Do Yard. Some of the ships that were built here are the Arizona, the Missouri, the Constellation, the Forrestal, the Independence, the Saratoga, the Iowa, and even the Maine of Remember the Maine fame, and also Robert Fulton's steamship, the Clermont. Back on Manhattan's east side, we can see the Chrysler Building, built in 1930. At 77 stories high, it was the tallest building in the world for just a few months, until the Empire State opened its doors in 1931. But height aside, this masterpiece of Art Deco architecture is considered by many as New York's finest skyscraper. Near the top of its stainless steel tower are gargoyles sticking out. that are modeled after a 1929 Chrysler radiator cap. The Chrysler Building is situated on 42nd Street. We began this Circle Line tour directly across the island of Manhattan at the opposite end of 42nd Street. Facing us is the familiar form of the United Nations headquarters. The tall 39-story glass building is the Secretariat Building. The long building on the riverfront is the Conference Building, where the Security Council meets. And behind the Conference Building is the General Assembly Building. John D. Rockefeller donated 18 acres of land on which the United Nations was built. When you enter the United Nations property, you are leaving the country. The land is not under the jurisdiction of New York City, New York State, or the United States. It is here that sovereign countries meet on a regular basis to try and mediate and resolve many of the world's problems. The addition of so many foreign envoys adds to the rich, diverse cultural fabric of which we are so proud. New York can be a crowded place, especially at noontime on Fifth Avenue, New York's best-known street. It is home to some of the smartest, chicest, and most expensive stores in the world. You don't have to buy anything. Window shopping is one of the most popular activities around. Right next door to Saks is St. Patrick's Cathedral, seat of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of New York. The cathedral, finished in 1895, provides a wonderful quiet respite from the hustle and bustle of Midtown Manhattan. Directly across from St. Patrick's is Rockefeller Center. Opened in 1932, it is the world's largest privately owned business and entertainment complex. Radio City, home of the Rockettes, is also located here. Rockefeller Center backs onto the Avenue of the Americas. That's 6th Avenue to most New Yorkers. 6th Avenue is also the corporate home of the 3 TV networks and provides a wonderful setting for eating lunch al fresco on a sunny day. More than anything, however, 6th Avenue epitomizes the feeling of a concrete canyon of skyscrapers. Back on the East River, directly behind us, is a 4,000-gallon-a-minute column of water called the Delacorte Fountain. It spouts water 400 to 600 feet into the air, 3 times the height of Old Faithful. On the Manhattan side, we are passing one of the most expensive neighborhoods in New York, Beekman Place. It's a quiet, tree-lined street, which evokes a 19th century sense of living that only a few New Yorkers can afford. Looming up behind Beekman Place is the angled crown of the 915-foot Citicorp Tower. It is the world's 8th tallest building and the 3rd tallest in Midtown Manhattan. Each of the 4 facades is laced with steel chevrons, directing weight down into the pillars, giving the building a look of bold simplicity. The 45-degree angle rooftop was built for solar energy, but solar plates were never installed as the project proved financially unfeasible. Another fashionable address that also looks out onto the East River is Sutton Place. Synonymous with wealth and luxury, Sutton Place more than lives up to its well-earned reputation. Right next to Sutton Place is the 59th Street Bridge, which connects Manhattan with Queens, the largest of New York's 5 boroughs and area, which is largely residential. As we pass under the bridge, we may notice a bright red aerial tram, which is used by residents of Roosevelt Island to commute to the rest of New York. The cost is the same as a bus or subway. Although unusual and fun, it is by no means the only way to get around this city. For speed, nothing beats the subway. The entire system carries 1 billion passengers per year over its 236 miles of track, only 134 of which are actually underground. For the same price of the subway, but consuming a bit more time, you might take a New York City bus. It's certainly quieter and more scenic, but have the correct change ready. And if you're willing to spend more money, you might try any of New York's yellow medallion taxicabs. But beware, like this traveler, an empty taxi is sometimes not that easy to find, and it's not even raining. About 1 million people commute to the island of Manhattan every business day, and many arrive at Grand Central Station, the landmark beneath the Pan Am building. As mentioned before, the tram connects Manhattan proper with Roosevelt Island. Stretching 2.5 miles from 47th Street to 86th Street, the island is officially part of the borough of Manhattan and home for over 2,000 families. It is in many ways a planned community. 25% of the island is set aside for parks and recreation. Back on Manhattan's east side, the tall white building and the others above the stone wall comprise Rockefeller University. Founded in 1901, it is primarily designed for medical research. The faculty-to-student ratio is 4-to-1. For those who have an interest in science, a visit to the Hayden Planetarium would prove to be very enjoyable. The planetarium is part of the American Museum of Natural History, a museum so vast that you can spend a week and still have more to see. But New York has plenty of other museums as well. There's the dramatic Frank Lloyd Wright Guggenheim on 5th, and Marcel Breuer's Whitney on Madison. Of course, there's the Metropolitan Museum of Art that has one of the finest collections in the world. And if a good book is what you like, check out the main branch of the Public Library. We are entering the choppy waters of Hellgate, the confluence of the East and Harlem Rivers and Long Island Sound. Until it was dredged, it was the home of many a shipwreck. So don't be surprised if the boat is a little bumpy. Over to our left, through the trees, we can see an 18th century house. It's called Gracie Mansion, and it's the official residence of the mayor. Built as a summer home by Archibald Gracie in 1799, the city acquired it in 1923, and it became the official mayoral residence in 1941. We are now in the Harlem River, and to our left we can see Benjamin Franklin Manhattan Center for Math and Science at 116th Street. It's a progressive high school for academically gifted students. We are passing the section of Manhattan known as Harlem. It is the largest black community in the United States. One of Harlem's best-known institutions is the Apollo Theater, where virtually every famous black entertainer has performed. Out of the many churches in Harlem, the Abyssinian Baptist Church boasts the largest congregation. On our right, Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built, in 1923 to be exact. It was extensively remodeled in 1973, although they kept the natural grass playing field. If you look at the front, you'll notice that the smokestack has been disguised to look like a Louisville Slugger baseball bat, complete with the Babe signature. The home of the Bronx Bombers is indeed in the borough of the Bronx, the only borough that actually is attached to the United States mainland. Manhattan and Staten Island are islands, and Brooklyn and Queens are part of Long Island. It is probably best known for the Bronx Zoo, but it's mostly residential. And by the way, it's the only borough which uses the article "the" in front of it. We don't say "the Manhattan" or "the Brooklyn," but we do say "the Bronx." These apartments stand on the site of the old Polo Grounds, home of the baseball Giants until they moved to San Francisco. Above on the hill is Coogan's Bluff, better known as Sugar Hill, where wealthy blacks lived in the 20s and 30s. To our left, we have an up-close look at the solid rock that is the foundation on which Manhattan's skyscrapers are built. It's called Manhattan schist, a form of granite, and it is one of the hardest of the Earth's rocks. The entire Empire State Building weighs less than the 55 feet of rock and dirt that were excavated to build it. And drilling that rock is no easy matter. As you've probably noticed, there's a lot of construction going on, leading some visitors to ask, when is this city ever going to be finished? To the left, those stadium lights you see are for Baker Field, and that White House is a rowing house, both for Columbia University, whose main campus is located further south. We are now circling the northernmost tip of Manhattan, and are now in Spuyten Duyvil, the body of water that connects the Harlem and Hudson rivers. To the right, the big blue C on the rock formation does not stand for Circle Line, but again for Columbia. Back on our left, this is the spot where Henry Hudson moored his ship, the Half Moon, and had a conference with the Indians before sailing upriver. It's hard to believe that this wooded area is part of the same Manhattan Island that we saw at the Battery. This land was given to the city by John D. Rockefeller under the condition that it be left in its natural state. We are now re-entering the Hudson River, and straight ahead are the famous Palisades of New Jersey. The Hudson River is actually the southernmost fjord in the Northern Hemisphere. To our left, the Cloisters, a branch of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's composed of parts of buildings brought over from southern France and Spain. A visit to the cloisters is a wonderful way to see the beauty of medieval art. Straight ahead is the George Washington Bridge, which connects New York City with Fort Lee, New Jersey. When completed in 1931, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world. It is now the 6th longest. The bridge weighs 1 million tons, which is supported by 4 cables containing 26,000 wires each. Just underneath the George Washington Bridge is a little red lighthouse. When the navigational lights were added to the bridge, there was no longer any need for the lighthouse and it was going to be torn down. However, Hildegard Swift wrote a children's book called The Little Red Lighthouse and the Great Gray Bridge. There was such a response to the book that the Coast Guard decided to give it to New York City. It is now a landmark and playground. One thing not to miss is New York at night. You can take a sunset cruise or catch a Broadway show or listen to some jazz after the theater. So come out after the sun goes down and watch the moon come up. As we finish our tour, we can see Grant's tomb on the left, the final resting place of our 18th president. Next to Grant's tomb is Riverside Church. In the 24-story bell tower are 74 bells. They comprise the Laura Spelman Rockefeller Carillon, the largest bell carillon in the world. Behind the church is the Morningside Heights area, which encompasses Columbia University. Chartered in 1754 as King's College, it was closed during the Revolutionary War and then reopened as Columbia College in 1784. Next to Columbia is the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. The Episcopal Cathedral is the largest Gothic-style cathedral in the world, housing a 124-foot nave. Like the construction of the great cathedrals of Europe, St. John is being built over a period of several hundred years, giving it the New York nickname, St. John the Unfinished. The area south of Morningside Heights is called the Upper West Side. Unlike Chinatown, Little Italy, and other pockets of cultural cohesion, the Upper West Side prides itself in its ethnic diversity. Streets like Columbus Avenue are currently enjoying a tremendous revitalization. Restaurants, shops, and apartments are springing up so fast that the Upper West Side is the hottest residential area in Manhattan today. Another reason might be its neighbor, Central Park. An 840-acre oasis right in the middle of Manhattan, Central Park is dear to the heart of New Yorkers. Designed by Olmsted and Vaux and built during the Civil War, it's a place where you can enjoy all forms of exercise or just get away from it all. At the southwest corner of Central Park is Columbus Circle, a major crossroads in New York City. The tall cylindrical structure is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, which was dedicated to the Union Army. Our Memorial Day parades end here, and it now honors all veterans of all wars. Next, we can see the Marina at 79th Street, where a number of families live all year round. And finally, we have a second view of the aircraft carrier Intrepid, which saw service in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and was a recovery ship for the Mercury and Gemini space programs. It's now converted to a Sea Air Space floating museum, open to the public. We have now cruised completely around Manhattan Island, a distance of 35 miles. Please join us again next time you visit New York. Our unequal skyline is always changing, always fresh. So don't let too much time pass before your next visit. For Captain Tom Curry, this is John Curran, thanking you for joining us on America's favorite boat ride.